Welcome to CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast with Business Solutions MVPs George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Sean Tabor. This is episode 57 for Monday, July 10th, 2017. Today we're going to be talking further about the new release that's coming up and our thoughts after having a couple weeks to think about it. We're going to get into the deprecated features, the things that are going away or will be going away soon after the next release. And we'll talk a little bit about the Inspire conference that's coming up. But first, let's talk about our sponsors. We'd like to thank Kingsway Soft. Kingsway Soft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 65 countries and regions rely on Kingsway Soft to integrate data with various business systems in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage their information assets. Kingsway Soft is a leading provider of Microsoft Dynamics integration software, including Dynamics 365, CRM, AX, Nav, GP, SL, as well as many other applications like Marketo, Dropbox, QuickBooks, and Salesforce. Whether you need one solution or several, Kingsway Soft works easily within the SSIS platform to make your integration processes as quick and easy as possible. We're also sponsored by Alexa CRM. WordPress powers more than 25% of all the websites on the internet, and it's the number one choice for blogs, websites, and portals because it's open source, simple to use, reliable, and extensible. And Dynamics 365 is a de facto standard for sales, marketing, and industry solutions. Now, WordPress and Dynamics can work together thanks to the Dynamics CRM WordPress plugin built with love by the Alexa CRM team. To build the plugin, Alexa has created an open-source Dynamics 365 PHP toolkit unlocking the world of Dynamics for PHP developers. You can download your 30-day trial from alexacrm.com/plugin and instantly create a portal by connecting Dynamics 365 and your WordPress site. We thank Kingsway Soft and Alexa CRM for sponsoring CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast. So, how are you this Monday morning?
Doing fine, doing very fine. Had a wonderful July 4th respite, so recharged and ready to go.
You still have all your fingers? You didn't lose anything in the freak fireworks accident?
Yeah, no. I was 4th of July at the Tabor household is more scary boom boom fire day for the dogs. So we spend that night consoling, caring, and trying to just get the dogs through the evening. So
you've had more time to digest the news of the upcoming, I think we call it either summer fall or Optner. I don't know what to call it. Autumn, summer, autumn.
We should align it to some kind of equinox, I think, at this point. You know?
It's summer somewhere release.
Yes, exactly.
And so now we've gotten past the original euphoria of look at all this good stuff. What's jumping out in your mind? So
now that, like you said, now that we're reviewing what's coming, digesting the impact, and all the cool opportunities, I really started looking back and started thinking, okay, so how does this impact my clients? Not necessarily in all the cool features that we can now use and enhance their business with, but how are the things that we've done in the past now impacted by these changes? What does that mean to their upgrade schedule? What if they're on-prem? What does that have to do with their upgrade schedule? Because with online, as we know, you can skip. If they wanted to, they could skip this next release, but then they're going to be forced to take the following release. So for online folks, it's, okay, we understand what's coming. Now we have to figure out, we have essentially 6 months to plan for it at the worst. However, if you have an on-prem customer and some of these things are happening, like let's say deprecated Outlook sync, how's the best way to address that? For a lot of customers, that's a really big deal, and can come as a bit of a shock. To really take advantage of the app for Outlook, for example, to really, really take full advantage of it, you need to be on Exchange Online. to really get the full features and functionality out of server-side sync and the lightweight app. Not all customers can do that, especially if they're on-prem. Typically, you're on-prem if for a very good reason, whether it's regulatory, whether it's an internal security issue, whether it's just an internal process that has been the way it's been, and they haven't turned that big ship around to move to the cloud. So it's not a change it's a one taken lightly, in my opinion. So I had the chance to talk with some clients this week about that, and the reaction was mixed. Not necessarily bad by any sense, but mixed, right? Because it was like, okay, on one hand, you're telling me there's a lot of cool things, but on another hand, we're having to prep for things we weren't thinking of prep for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's like there's different reasons. Some people have good reasons for still being on client sync. Our old favorite, delegate tracking, is one.
Yep. Definitely.
And so my hope is that Microsoft plugs some of these gaps. Then you got people who aren't opposed to it or don't have a good reason other than this is how we're using it, and if it's not broken, why fix it? But now it is effectively broken, or it won't work after the next release. And we see solid improvements in the lightweight app, biggest one of which is it handles hybrid scenarios. So right now, online and an online can use it. People who are on-premise with on-premise Exchange can use the new app, but people that have Exchange on-premise and Dynamics 365 online can't use it. This solves the problem, but it does raise a question about how do you upgrade? If, for example, server-side sync, realistically, you want to test it before you upgrade and get it working. But if there's some reason why you can't use server-side sync in production, it does bring up a timing question, about how do I make this switch in a way that doesn't impact my users in a negative manner. Same thing with the SharePoint servers, with the client-side SharePoint control, is you really want to be making that move before you have to and having time to test it out. So that's the first thing I did after I saw it, was I called 2 or 3 customers that I know are using client-side SharePoint or client-side sync or offline. I had one that has 600 offline users, and their response was, well, this is going to be fun for us.
Right, exactly. What an opportunity.
Yeah. So what jumped out at you as kind of the most surprising thing on the deprecated list?
Really, the biggest one, I think, was the Outlook client, because I have a lot. Well, actually, the majority of my clients are in financial services. So, given the delegate permissions, like we've talked about ad nauseum, and that kind of configuration and the implementation, that's a really, really big deal. And I just don't know what my clients, if they're online, which some of them are really going to do, because they have to take the upgrade, right? So then that capability that they're using now is going to break, and they don't really have the opportunity to change their Exchange infrastructure, right? And you don't want someone going from online to on-prem, so that you can, delay an upgrade, because that's an initiative in and of itself. I've not had, thankfully, not had anybody even suggest that. But the Outlook client is a bigger deal to me, only because it now starts until this is completely proven out in all of our user stories and especially in financial services for delegate tracking, then you really have to start looking at things like Riva. And
Riva's, I saw a demo of Riva last week, and it's come a long way, and I think has some really nice use cases.
Right. It does, but that's heretofore. It would be something that you looked at least in my implementations. It's something I looked at if they were already using it, right? I could typically say, well, we're good. We could handle what you need to do with either Outlook sync or server-side sync, and that was that. Now it's pretty much something that we're going to have to add to the checklist to say, is this a situation for Riva? And it's just another step we're going to have to go through.
So what is your understanding of when people will be forced to take this upgrade? Because it seems like the Dynamics 365 upgrade, since it was tied to a change in license SKU, it was almost like that was different than the, say, 2015 or 2016 upgrades for online. Mm-hmm. Because I had people who were still on 2013 online well into or up to 2016.
Right.
And I've got to wonder, since this, which was originally the spring release that got delayed to July and then, may not be out till close to fall, I can't see another release coming out right on the heels of that. So does that mean that they can wait until the fall 2018 release?
Well, it depends. See, now, this is something I was thinking about. With the new enhancements in version 9 for the app framework, right? Technically, you could very well see another release right on the heels of it for a sliver of functionality. So now you're kind of in a game of, okay, I'm going to spin the wheel. Does this sliver release affect my customers? So is it like, for example, if we spin the wheel and they're just doing an update to voice of the customer. Okay, well, we have a couple customers actively using it right now, so okay, I know where to go. But if it's if it affects service, for example, or field service, that's a big deal, right? And in the way that the new app framework is situated, they could theoretically say, here's a new release of this single app. And that's all this.
Yeah, impacts. No, they definitely could. They could have, and you'll have things that won't be ready day one. But the other thing is, it kind of flips on its head the logic we had, which for so long was minor release spring, major release fall, and this is the summer release, which is a major version change where Dynamics 365 was a .2 release.
Right.
Right. So that's where for a while they were like, the date rules what comes out, and if the functionality is not there, we won't put it out. Now it's, we have to let it bake a little bit longer, which I think is good, and in some ways gives customers in some ways a little bit more breathing room to, sit back and, we don't have, it's been a while, we don't feel like there's big bombs hitting our time. But let me ask you this question, because when we were going through the executive briefing, people were saying, whoa, this is the biggest release since CRM 2013. No, it's the biggest one since 2011. No, this is the biggest since CRM 4.
Yeah.
What do you think is this the biggest release since CRM 4? And was CRM 4 a bigger release than CRM 2011?
Well, okay. So I think having gone through the painful upgrade as an on-premise customer at the time for both of those, I would say that 4 was a very big release, but 2011 for me was a bigger one, right? Because of the whole new UI, that whole concept. Similarly, this release version 9 not only gives us the UI concept with some great new tools, but it's also the framework that is a huge release, much like 2011 was to 4. So I would say this could be quite a significant release, dependent on what apps you're currently using.
Yeah, the piece that I really have a desire to learn more about now that I was confused about, but is customer insights. Yeah. I'm seeing how it's coming together and how a lot of questions that we've wanted to ask and answering, like how often are we touching certain customers and are we most effectively working with our clients? It's really seems to be a great answer for that.
Yeah, that the way that customer insights and relationship insights are going to really meld together and give you an incredible integration, as well as the analytics that could really drive a lot of interesting business decisions that you don't have the ability to do now, albeit through manual processes that are legacy and are slower. So yeah, I think we're going to see more and more of those services, much like the way that Flow. I think you're going to see more and more creativity and tightly integrated and interwoven in your solutions when you deploy now. Because, and I was thinking of this. One of the ways that you could get around some of these sync issues with Outlook could be Flow. It's possible. You could have it create Outlook appointments. You could have it create Wunderlist tasks or to-do tasks. I mean, there's ways to do it more so than the standard sync. So I think it's on us to really think outside of the box. And part of that is looking at packaged products like Riva, but also looking at this new tool set. What is the new way that you could do things? What innovation is just sitting out there, maybe untapped, that we might be able to tackle an older business problem with a new solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that, as I understand it, Customer Insights can take data not just from Dynamics, but also can match email addresses to your Exchange and other places. And so that's where I think Microsoft is really well positioned for what's coming. They just need to put a little bit more attention on where people are right now, and people still do need the track paradigm.
Yeah. Well, and in some cases, maybe that track paradigm needs to be more intuitive in terms of being able to define when and why I want to track things. And some of that analytics, for example, in Office 365, from an Outlook perspective, maybe Outlook should prompt you and say, hey, do you want to track this? This looks like, this matches an address of a contact in CRM, or this mentions a company in CRM, or this mentions an opportunity in CRM. Do you want to track this? And prompt the user. I think, especially in something like financial services space, that would be huge to take out the guesswork on, or have to do the manual, constant track and CRM set regarding kind of place we are now, where we could have more intuitive, knowledge-based prompting and action, which would improve the data quality and reduce the constant track and litany of stuff that's in a activity feed that you don't necessarily need to see.
Right, and that's where I guess knowing how to introduce that to especially existing customers that have been doing in the track set regarding paradigm, and that's still available and is something that is probably always going to be in CRM. How do you introduce the scary new world of the system does the work for you?
Well, you really have to walk through. You have to know your customer pretty well. You can't just go in there and say, "Let me show you all these cool bells and whistles." You have to really speak to their existing process that you've either created, helped create, or re-envisioned for them in a previous implementation. And there has to be some kind of ROI on how it's going to increase productivity, how it's going to reduce dirty data, how it's going to help in some way, right? How it's going to help me close a deal faster. It's going to help me reduce my cost per potential client. Something, it'll give me clicks back that I can use somewhere else. Something to that effect. So a good story has to be there based on that client's business process, in my opinion.
So later this morning from Washington, D.C., the keynote of the Inspire 2017 conference is coming up. Mm-hmm. And if you've downloaded our episode early this morning, you can still catch the keynote if you go to news.microsoft.com/Inspire 2017. Looks like a good lineup. They're going to have Satya Nadella, Brad Smith, Judson Altoff, who leads the Dynamics group, as well as Power BI and other stuff there. Javrilla Schuster, not sure who Javrilla is. I should look that up. But anyway, they've already had the preview for Dynamics. I know it's Microsoft Business Products, so it's more than just Dynamics, but Dynamics is a huge part of that. Any ideas, or do you think we'll see some big news coming out that isn't already out from the preview a couple weeks ago?
From a Dynamics 365, I don't know. Perhaps we'll see some more talk about the business, our small business edition, and the vision behind it. Perhaps we'll see more about the cognitive services and relationship insights and that sort of thing. But I'm not sure what more they could tell us that they haven't told us already. Right.
So I've been thinking and talking to some other people about Business Edition, and as we talked about last episode, I think Business Edition looks really good. We don't know the limits. The big three are how much data, how many users, and how extensible. But I'm wondering, do you think it's like a 50 user product, or do you think it'll go up to 150, 200 users? What's your prediction?
The early number I heard was 250. So anything 250 and above was enterprise. I don't know where I heard that. I think I heard that. It may just me be thinking I heard that, but I'm going to go with 250.
I think if it's 250, they're muddying the water too much. Because I think if they went 250, there would be enterprise clients that will want it. And I think there's going to be, with the sales channels, that would just get muddy. I might be wrong there. But, and it also raises, I've been going through training for Adobe Marketing, which I finally understand a little bit more kind of where Adobe fits in versus Click Dimensions. And I love Click Dimensions. We've implemented it many times, and I still think that's the best and most integrated marketing solution. But the key difference between, and it's very similar to Marketo versus Click Dimensions. If you want to do campaign execution integrated with CRM, Click Dimensions does that great and has leading features. Mm-hmm. Adobe and Marketo go beyond that, though, and let you actually run and plan and budget a marketing program, like a whole marketing department. You could run your whole marketing program through Adobe.
Right. It's an agency solution.
But they break it up. So like you got Adobe Campaign, and you can plan, I want this program for cross-selling and upselling, and plan out your strategy, and then you can execute your campaigns and tie your campaigns into it. They also have some intelligence with, based on Sean Tabor's involvement in the last campaign and how he responded to it, it'll guide you to how he should be involved in this next campaign. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right. There are agency management features, but the pieces that integrate with Dynamics are, specifically the campaign side of it, which you can do without the agency stuff.
So does it handle the things that you would normally hear someone using something like Click Dimensions or even a Salesforce Marketing Cloud? How muddied are those lines?
I think for the average Click Dimensions, Adobe is overkill, because it's got really great functionality, but probably from a cost perspective and from a perspective of just functionality, it's more than what most people need. And also, I saw a demo of what the integration looks like. I still haven't actually touched it, though. And so that's the question, is where Click Dimensions' huge advantage for people who are dynamic centric is you could do all of it from within Dynamics versus some of the other products that have equal or greater marketing functionality but aren't as highly integrated. I think Dynamics Marketing was only loosely integrated, and that was kind of its downfall.
Well, but if you have a marketing client, or you have a marketing a head of marketing that's part of an organization where you've implemented Dynamics 365, if they're wanting that separate UI and they don't want to be in CRM, they just want to be able to push or pull data, then yes, I would agree something like Adobe would be appropriate. But how does it, and you may not know this, how does it play against some of the larger players in the marketing space and its capabilities, like an Eloqua or
it's equivalent to an Eloqua or Marketo.
Okay. What's the, or what about Cvent's more event management? But
yeah, Cvent's more event management. But that's the thing is Click Dimensions is being smart. They have integrations with Cvent. They're getting integration with basically the same online social listening platform that people like Acton and others and Sales Fusion use. So you'll be able to now use Click Dimensions in a broader form as well, and not just for marketing, but actually sentiment analysis and getting that feedback and the same type of thing.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I will need to jump into that training as well, just so I can understand it better and I can articulate it better to a customer. But as of on first blush right now, it just seems to be just this behemoth solution. But if you can cut it up into pieces, and if it's licensed that way, that may be something that's valuable. Anything really at this point that's more than the out-of-the-box marketing capability is a win. I don't know how many clients I have where the marketing entities are really just buckets for marketing lists. They're not.
Yeah, you still need they still need to modernize marketing lists.
Yes,
because those things serve a key role even outside of marketing. You need a general. Here's what you got to have. Give a multi-step list generator and don't care about what entity you're doing it for.
Right.
That would be beautiful.
Right.
So if you want to do a marketing list of widgets, let me do that.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
And the other thought, looking at the deprecated functionality, like the service functionality, what I've realized is one sub headline is we're basically getting to the point where I believe nearly almost everything that doesn't work on mobile will be gone with the deprecation of the service events, with the exception of marketing a campaign and campaign responses. That list I've been maintaining on Tip of the Day is now down to like one item.
That's fantastic. That is really good. The less that we have to worry about things not being there, the better, in my opinion.
Interestingly enough, one of the new features I think makes up for the loss of the SharePoint grid control. And one of the new features announced was that now you can, as a developer, you can override the default event on the grid. So you can basically code what happens when people double-click on the grid row.
Is that for the SharePoint integration or any grid?
No, any grid. So,
okay.
But what I'm saying is that you can surface information from the SharePoint and then effectively override the double click, so taking people to that library. I guess listing documents would be hard, but then again, virtual entities to help. So you can find out the workaround, but definitely it would. Are you saying that did catch some people off guard and now they don't know what to do, or they cannot move upstream and upgrade?
There are people who are hanging on to the grid control because of the inability of the server-side SharePoint in its current form to show subfolders. Where if you have an account that has a million documents and you've got a subfolder, which everybody who uses document integration does, is they create a subfolder for quotes and a subfolder for proposals and a subfolder for invoices, and so you don't see just a big long list of documents. But one thing we got a glimpse of, and I didn't catch this the first time, I caught this on my rewatch, they did show in the productivity session that the server-side SharePoint is getting hierarchical folder support. So, and again, I haven't seen, but the screenshot they showed and what they talked about looks like we're finally getting that last missing piece, which I'm really glad to see, because I feel the pain of people who need to be able to, find the document quickly when there's more than 50 of them, if there's subfolders, if they're all in one list. And this will be, I'm saying this is my number one feature nobody's talking about, and one that real world people will be excited about. Now we'll have to decide, if you're upgrading, do we make the switch to server-side SharePoint first and give you 5 minutes with no visibility of subfolders, and then upgrade you, or do we upgrade and then your SharePoint integration stops working and then you have to take time to do it? So we'll have to work through those nuances, but it's good news nonetheless.
Well, interestingly enough, that we now have a new debate, right? Whether you should, in fact, store documents in SharePoint at all.
Absolutely. And this is something that even us tipsters can learn things. And, I'll admit, I steal from places. I steal tips wherever I find them. The Facebook forum, my internal Yammer, people email me questions internally. I make tips out of them. And one of the ones, and this is one that my suggestion was outdated, and this underscores how things are changing so fast these days. But one thing I didn't realize is, and somebody in Facebook forum asked, is there any possible way to search in attachments? And, I said, move them to SharePoint and refer them to an old tip we had. And somebody popped in and said, no, you can, with relevant search, you can search within notes attachments, you can search in email attachments. That really kind of muddies the water a little bit, because, there's a real argument now that moving them to SharePoint or Azure gives me a benefit of having better storage and lower costs, but at least today, putting them in CRM with relevant search gives me the better search experience.
Well, yeah. Well, one would hope that at some point relevant search would be open for extensibility, so you can add your own data sources, and it is to a certain extent. It's based on Azure Search, right? So I would think that Azure Search is certainly capable searching SharePoint. The trick is, though, how you relate SharePoint records back to the records in your Dynamics 365.
Yeah, there's no metadata stored on them, so
correct. So there's no metadata on SharePoint side, so you have to marry these two. And the same challenge will be when it's open for extensibility, and you would have to with the things like virtual entities coming in, right? You would have at some point to open Azure Search or relevant search for extensibility to be able to quickly search, because certainly if you pull in data in from some external data sources, search at the source will always be faster. You want to return results and the metadata for the results and then pull it through. So displaying UI. So that's a lot of things. It's kind of wait and see. Release is now fall release, I believe, right? So we slowly nudge into the territory when it's going to be in preview until, autumn, northern autumn, and then released. The funny thing about that release is that usually fall release meant features for on-premises. The media features come into on-premises. So I wonder, where does it live on-premises?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about. You know this stuff on premises. You still remember, or you so far in online that you don't even remember what I'm talking about?
Right. Yeah, no, we still have some. And matter of fact, I think that's where Sean is right now. He's working on an on-premises deployment. But yeah, I think there's going to be some interesting things coming. It's hard to it's a mixed message right now because the cloud is definitely the way of now, not just the future. Microsoft is announcing a slate of layoffs, and those layoffs all involve on-premises groups that work in on-premises technologies, but they're also releasing on-premises versions of Power BI, Azure Stack components for basically a hybrid on-premises Azure, scenarios. So it's interesting times. And looking at the list of the deprecated features, I have one question for you. See if you know this. I had heard at one time that field service under the covers leverages some of the legacy service scheduling entities, not the some of the legacy service entities, not necessarily the scheduler UI, but do you know, does it leverage any of those entities? Because I see service scheduling as a deprecated feature, and I had to wonder, is there any core functionality in that is leveraged by the new field service?
It used to. It used to be built entirely on the built-in scheduling features. The ones that have been deprecated. But I think since then it's been redone, reworked, the internal's been re-engineered, and there is a new scheduling engine that is technically can be released independently, but it's not available independently of the field service or PSA, I believe. That's the scenario.
Definitely. I mean, I've seen our great tipster guide to the unified scheduler, and I'm actually have a project where I'm probably going to be using that. The challenge is if you have somebody who just wants to schedule stuff but doesn't really do field service or project service, saying they do have to license one or the other, and then you can use the unified scheduler to schedule whatever you want, is my understanding.
And disable the other stuff, yeah. So I'm not aware of any of the internal features, but the good news is, as with any of these developments, that the greatest driver for the features, or in this case for the cleanup, is actually internal development. I can give you a couple other examples. Right? For years we've been whinging about the absence of the installer for the solutions, right? And then Unified Service Desk got some traction, got internal traction and internal buy, and then suddenly we have all these, tools within the SDK that enables us to build installable solutions. Because it's been driven from the inside, because the Unified Service Desk guys needed this ability to install the solution, run some code before and after, and so forth, package it all, deliver it all, and suddenly we've got, ability to build it all as developers. So there is no better driver than some internal team requiring feature, or in this particular case, deprecating feature. So it won't be deprecated until everyone stops using it. So if field service does use some odd entity, like subjects, for example, then subjects won't go anywhere.
Or they'll be there behind the scenes and they won't put it in the sitemap. The one that made me laugh was announcements, because I challenge anyone to go to a new Dynamics 365 environment and find announcements, or if you can find them in the settings, find how you can display them anywhere. It doesn't exist. You can't add them to a dashboard. It's almost like you have to be that one guy that has a CRM4 environment that was upgraded and didn't change your sitemap, and then you can still use it. But I don't think you can even find them if you don't have the old sitemap.
That's right, and it doesn't show in the list of entities at all.
Right.
Like when you go in and you say, show me the entities, and it shows you customizable entities, and you say, no, show me all entities, and it shows you all entities, announcement's not there. I had to sort of double check and say, how do you, the same thought came across my mind that how on earth, if I do want to use it, how do I get to it? Right? It is an entity, but it's like, I know you there. Come on out. And it's like, and it's like just not there. So,
Right.
Speaking of deprecated features, so which ones you think will be difficult to sell to your customer base?
The one, and I've started a campaign to save the dialogues. I wrote today's CRM tip of the day. In that, and I love your anecdote about the pugs. They're functional but ugly. Basically, that's what dialogues are.
That's not what the customer says. The customer says that everyone recognizes that they're ugly, but some people love them to death.
Yeah, they're face that only their mother or pet owner could love. But yeah, the dialogues. The reason I am a little taken aback that their death is being announced is it's the one thing that I don't see a good replacement for. And so take any other ones on the list, there's a viable replacement for these things like service scheduling. There's field service. And the deprecation of APIs. There's newer, better APIs, but there's no really clear equivalent of a dialogue. And
I have to stop you right there. There is no substitute for Paracho knowledge base. Absolutely not.
Yeah, but nobody uses it, so that's the difference.
That's why there is no substitute, because no one would have to replace.
Right. But I think that the suggestion in the Microsoft article is use task flows or process flows, which works for some cases. I think if you're closing a case and you have the last step, a checkbox that says resolve case, that to me is as good or better as clicking a button, having a box pop up and saying resolve case. But there's dialogues that are very common that are multi-step wizards that there's just not a good replacement for. For one thing, task flows only work on mobile, and no client I know of wants to roll out a process that only works on mobile or only works in the browser. It's like you've got to design two different processes. And if you have a process that a user runs multiple times per record, like an update customer process or something like that, we have a easy button that pops up a three-step wizard so they can quickly do something that then triggers an action. Process flow, you can't have a zillion instances of the same process flow run against each record. It's like a contiguous progress through the life cycle of the record. You can change them, but so that's where I made some suggestions. And I actually put this on the ideas with a link to vote for it. And I think task flows could get there if they freed them to work with all interfaces. And you have to make up for things like being able to run it in context of a record, because a task flow is great for mobile if you want to hit the button, select the record you're on, then do something with it. But if you want to have something, I'm on this record, I want an easy pop-up, like we've had on Tip of the Day, replace your close opportunity dialogue with a custom dialogue. It's not the cleanest in the world, but it works, whereas there's not a good option for that. So hopefully, this is one of those things where there's 2 or 3 releases left. I think, 2 or 3 changes that I laid out, and if you go to CM Tip of the Day and look at tip number 914, which is, as we're recording this, the latest one, add some comments to that, because, again, I like task flows. I think, and I've heard people say, I think having them so bound to the process flow creation UI limits them, whereas, if we had a task flow that could be contextual or not contextual like it is right now, which is, we asked for dialogues, give us the option to not run them in context of record, because I had dialogues say, create a case, and you had to run it in context of a record, so I would have some dummy account that it would link it to. I like the option to have it where you can have an easy button that you hit, but it's something that is multiple deployments use, and it's one of those things that takes the process that you jump between three different entities.
Okay, man, I have to stop you right there. You just ranting. You officially old because you in my time we had the time.
That's why I'm the editor. I can cut my rant shorter.
Anyway, what do you think? There's one option we didn't discuss, and you didn't mention it, and perhaps it's a viable, I wouldn't say alternative, but viable addition. What about ability to run Power App in the context?
I like that idea. I am concerned too with the introducing potential delays between the user action and the system job, because what I love about dialogues is they're a front end to a workflow. In that you do something, it's a single job basically. You're basically giving inputs that then drive a system job.
Thinking forward, I'm saying as a developer, I'm very excited. I think it will be a groundbreaking feature, integration feature, ability to, webhooks, to deploy webhooks. And interestingly enough, it's been announced sort of webhooks out, but custom actions, which is effectively webhooks in for Dynamics, not quite, but close enough. They've been extended so to include missing data types, and now you can effectively call into the workflow using custom actions. So what I'm arguing that there are some equivalents of your functionality, so you're not losing it completely. But I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's a replacement, but I'm saying that with the Power Apps, the one thing that this approach does overcome is the ugliness and inflexibility of the dialog UI.
Yeah, and dialogues we have not used dialogues as much as we did before mobile was a big thing, because they don't work on mobile, and anybody who uses mobile, you got to find other options now anyway. So again, the writing's been on the wall there, and seeing them not update it, I kind of had my suspicions. And I agree. If we could put easily in context, call a Power App, and pass parameters to it. I do know a number of small call centers that use dialogues as the engine for their call scripts as well, because it gives you the ability to have a question that you don't tie to it's an unbound control. So what you type in a field could be a, hi, how are you? And then certain ones update. And that it is, it's not the most intuitive UI, a dialogue like a workflow. You can teach somebody who's not a developer to change it, add an additional question to it, change the help text. It's not as intuitive as I'd like it to be, but it's something that, is something that I think we need an answer for, some kind of a configurable wizard type interface that's easy to use.
Well, you'd be glad to know that people started putting comments directly on the article on docs.microsoft.com about deprecated features, specifically asking questions about the dialogues. Anyway, let's move on from the dialogues, otherwise we're going to be here forever. Now, I had the question because you're dealing with the enterprise deployments, which is not my thing, let's put it this way. The Project Service Finder app, the moment I installed it, I expected to be some kind of a lightweight mobile client to the projects, to PSA. What I found is the functionality to search and bid for the projects and I deleted the application from my phone because I said, who uses that functionality? I used to work in the enterprise, right? When I did work, something must have changed since that time, because I do not recall anyone saying, what do I feel like working on tomorrow? Let me see what's coming up in our enterprise. No, your manager tells me, okay, George, when you're done with that, you're moving on X. You don't like it? Here's the door,
Well, I
Did you ever come
think there is
across
a
of
place.
anyone bidding for the projects?
No, people don't bid for the projects, but I have seen in professional services organizations like ours, you will have times where sometimes your boss has your next project lined up, but we have I've seen resources where the project you're on pauses for a while and somebody wants to find some time to keep their utilization up. I can see that kind of thing, of doing that, but I think it was an idea. I don't know of anybody who used it though. So that's probably, and that's one of the things that I find both scary and hopeful, is that Microsoft apparently is taking a harder stand about cutting things out that people aren't using if they're features like, I didn't know one of the items, the ready to use business processes. I don't even know if I really know what those are. Are those the sample opportunity to order
That's right.
business process flows?
Yeah.
Are there no examples now?
They used to. Well, they used to be when you click that button, ready to use, install ready to use, it would pull in the solution, which contained something like 14 or 18 pre-built processes plus some background workflows to support those processes and so forth. And it's just natural that they move to app source. That's where they belong. It's distribution. So I was actually somewhat surprised that they, instead of just releasing it as a managed solution and saying, you can download and install it, they went to all the trouble, creating an item on the site. It's not even a sitemap. It was on the page. They created an item on the page that would do the same thing. So it's kind of always been kind of suspect for me.
That seems a little bit silly to put in the deprecated features list, because that's not really a feature. That's more of a pre-created records. And if somebody has built their process flow, as an offshoot of the ready-to-use process flow, it's not like that's going to go away anytime.
Well, you're not acquiring any dependency if you did, because the only way to build it was to copy, right? So you couldn't modify directly. So unless you found the way to modify directly, which would be silly for any third-party solution, the only way to utilize it would have been study, copy, do your own thing. So I don't feel pity for people who got dependency on these ready-to-use processes. I'm saying, well, you should have thought about this before, It's
Right.
like any third-party solution. But yeah, just to wrap up, so I'll talk about deprecated features. Deprecated, everyone should chill a bit and start supporting Joel Coase for the dialogues. Save the dialogues campaign. And as far as other features is concerned, just chill. They're not going away immediately. Though I did actually just yesterday, new customer, or rather new user at the old customer ask about using Outlook, and I firmly said, no, you're going to use Outlook app. You're not going to use Outlook. And that was the end of discussion. The most important thing to me about deprecated features, yes, they're going to be removed sometime in the future. It's not a big deal because upgrades are now user-driven. What is important is that you shouldn't be expecting any enhancements. So you no longer can say, hey, look, let's wait for the next release for Outlook client and then they will fix X, Y, Z. No, they will not. Even if they probably will fix security bugs if they found, right? But they're not going to be fixing.
I would argue you've been in that state for the last 4 or 5 releases, because none of the new features, from the search features or the improved recently viewed records to the quick create button, none of that stuff has ever been added to the Outlook client. So you've really been in that no enhancement state, unless it's form level stuff, since really 2013. And the other thing I would say is, I agree, don't freak out. Although the first calls I made after seeing the briefing were to my 3 customers that use offline and Outlook, because that is something that's going away, and that it is something that will impact them on the next update. So if you are one of those 2 or 3 features that are going away, I'm not saying freak out, but plan. And the other thing I did is I sat down with people on my team and said, unless you have a really good reason, don't use these features on the deprecated list. You're setting yourself behind unless you have a good reason, and there are good reasons, see my dialogue rant, to use them in some cases, but unless you have a good reason, and the reasons are becoming less and less to use the traditional Outlook client, use the Outlook app.
Yeah. Okay, so deprecated means that carefully plan for the future. Now, what about new features? As you mentioned to me offline, that some people believe that this is the most important release since ever. What you're thinking about it? Is it?
I kind of, when I first heard them saying, I heard somebody, I think it was Cognetta or somebody saying, this is the biggest release since 2011, and then somebody else said, this is the biggest release since CRM4, and I tried to catch my breath a little bit, and because it's so easy to get caught up in the hype and think every release is the biggest release ever, and in some ways I think it is. I think you have to look at what category you're talking about. So are you talking about user experience? Are you talking about new features? Are you talking about enhancements to new features? Are you talking about platform and administration? Because I would argue that user experience, as far as you talk about radically changing user experience, I think 2013 was bigger than this, because this still has, the forms still look similar. They've added nice, gradients between sections. They've changed the social pane, but somebody could, log in tomorrow, be upgraded, and still find their stuff, generally.
Yeah, the stuff, no one moved the cheese. They created lots of new flavors of cheese, but no one moved.
There's some new flavors of Limburger and cheddar, and
some cheeses you wish they didn't create new flavors of, but I'm totally with you. Like, to me as developer, I could argue that 2011 was a big shift. Remember, since 2011, we didn't have to change our code, right? As far as backend is concerned. Well, now we do have Web API to move to, but technically speaking, we didn't have. It stands, and organization service, or rather interface, iOrganization service, is not going anywhere. It's still, create, update, delete, retrieve multiple, and execute. So it's not going anywhere. It's still there, and it survived test of time. The vehicle has been changing from SOAP to Web API, but under the hood, the backend stands. And the biggest change was at 2011 time from CRM4. Some people argue introduction of, generic dynamic entities. That was the signal that platform is maturing. So it's like, I can argue. To me, as developer, probably as a backend developer, let clarify, 2013 was non-event. There's nothing changed apart from the new form type. There's nothing drastically changed as a backend developer, right? As a front-end developer, definitely there's new form type. Are we getting the new form type now with the unified interface?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or is it replacing the Service Hub? That would be the fifth one, right?
Right. Yeah, that's good. So I think if I was thinking back, going even back to 2011, it's like we've alternated between new functionality release and refinement release. So 2013, added a bunch of, process flows and added access teams and the new form layout. And then 2015 was a big refinement on that. There were a few new features. 2016, you got a bunch of new features. Dynamics 365 was 8.2. They had some new stuff, flashy stuff that was preview, but it was more or less a refinement on 2016 and rebranding. Where this is ambitious is it hits refining existing features like the social pane, like the SharePoint integration, the Outlook app, the mobile app. All these things are being refined and maturing in a big way. It's also adding substantive new features, new versions, business edition marketing, business edition events, other new features that we may not even have heard about yet. And it's also touching the dusty back end for product UI, for customization, for how you lay field forms out, how you lay views out, things they haven't touched since really version 4, if you really think about it. There's still a few things like, and it's interesting. I have a tip I update periodically about what doesn't work in mobile, and it's getting smaller and smaller. If you look at the deprecated features like dialogues, like the service entities, they're basically almost closing that list where we have now.
By removing features, that's a nice way to solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly. There's still like campaigns and campaign responses, but I think my list will be down to one thing.
Campaigns and campaign responses probably would go to the marketing at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it can be argued that it is the most ambitious release as far as the scope of what it's trying to do. I think if you're concerned more about what's your user experience going to be, and I haven't played with it yet, we're getting close, but I haven't played with it yet. But what I saw is it's not going to paraphrase move the cheese of the user so much that it's going to put them into shock. You're going to want to retrain them on certain things. If you're a consultant or administrator or someone who configures forms, then I think you're going to want to brush up and make sure you know where everything is now, because there's some pretty radical stuff happening there.
I have a perfect pitch for you. You can walk into a meeting with the customer who uses heavily, let's say, dialects, and you say, yes, I know the dialects have been deprecated, don't worry about it, because we now have support for vector image web resources. So it's like, okay, I'm not sure what to make out of it. Okay, you support SVG, big deal. Is it a big deal? Is it like scalability?
I don't know.
I'm really confused about this one.
This probably came from Gus Gonzalez with his 65-inch monitor, wanting to see high-definition icons.
Oh, the one where you need high ceilings for.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe if when Dynamics finally goes to HoloLens, maybe you can use vector images to make 3D icons or something.
That's a good point. No, I think that's
what everybody wants.
Well, you can certainly sidetrack the conversation about the dialects. But look, as developer, I'm very excited about certain things, virtual entities. That's kind of a new thing. What I'm curious about, and I did mention that briefly in our tip, but what I'm curious about, do you see scenarios where the whole idea of virtual entity is going to be gamed? Like, let's say you don't have any data source to go to, you just do things on the fly.
Yeah, I don't know.
You pretend that you have something whilst in fact you don't. Okay. From UI perspective, is it my imagination or the colors slowly making way back, and instead of flat 2 or 3 color UI, we're now getting some color back in our cheeks, and before you know, 3D icons back in vogue? Is that the...
Yeah.
Is that
Well, you notice on the executive briefing, one of the first sessions was about accessibility or reference accessibility. And I really think that the standards that Microsoft has everywhere else around visual controls and maybe screen readers, and for people who are vision impaired, being able to distinguish, where one part ends, another part ends, the current UI really didn't comply with that. And that's where I think one of the reasons for the borders coming back and the color returning to our cheek is it makes it just a much better, much more usable system.
I totally agree. And in case you missed it, I graded JAWS support, the screen reader support in upcoming Unified Service Desk as highest item on the list, because that's always been a problem. And when we were doing deployments and training, the question did come up every time, particularly like training. Why I like training, because you're talking to the people who involved into dozens of projects, right? So you kind of tapping into this collective brain across multiple projects. And one of the consistent feedback was the lack of the accessibility support. And now JAWS support is coming, so I said that's great. That's going to lower the barrier of entry into a lot of places, like particularly in government and things where, for all the negatives we can say about the government structure, support for standards is probably one of the stronger points, and support for regulations and standards.
Right.
So and the push for that. So I like that, and I like accessibility making its way to the product. Okay, so business edition aside, what else excites you when you read it through?
The things that excite me are some of the things. Excuse me. There's some things I mentioned. The social pane. I get the most excited about some of the littlest features, but they're the ones that touch real users. I think the configurable social pane or hierarchy history timeline is going to be much more usable from what they saw, and just the ability to configure it and change it. I like the fact that the Outlook app is adding some of the missing pieces, and I think now it's ready to use. I use it now, but I think even more so, some of the things that are missing around tracking of appointments and other things, especially in mobile, are going to be there. Those are the kinds of things that I think real people are going to immediately benefit from. Some changing topics here. We've been getting some emails from people who want to make our websites better, like CRM Tip of the Day. And they take a approach of basically telling us how bad our website is, and then say, "Pay me money, I'll make it better." So, do you think, given that Dynamics covers marketing functionality, do you think that effective marketing strategy is to tell people that they stink?
Oh, you mean that email? Yeah, let me. I think we can quote it. Dear business owner of crmtipoftheday.com, how is it possible that your website is having so many errors? Yes, most of the people share their anger and frustration once they get my email. I will show you, and then he lists what he's gonna show us. Like missing pages, no alt pages with no meta description tag. Found on your CRM Tip of the Day. And he's got large professional team who can fix all of that. That was the bottom line. Right. But yeah, look, in my life, professional life, I've seen only, and probably in real life as well, I've seen only one example where telling people that they suck at something actually worked. If you never come across of the You Suck at Photoshop series, and you want to learn something new about Photoshop, you can go, you can search for it, you can Bing, you can Google, you can DuckDuckGo. Is that gonna catch up? Because I'm currently using DuckDuckGo browser, and I'm kind of liking it because of the vanilla interface. But sorry, browser, DuckDuckGo search engine. In any case, so you can search for it and you can find You Suck at Photoshop. There used to be web series. I think they stopped doing it, but used to be a very successful web series of tutorials, Photoshop tutorials. But basically, yeah, it was very well rehearsed, scripted, rehearsed, impersonated. It was brilliant, right? But that was the only successful case where telling people that they suck at something actually generated some positive feedback. I don't know.
I've seen CRM consultants try it. I've seen CRM consultants try it.
Do tell.
Yeah. So what you do is you say, okay, Mr. Potential Customer that I want to get into, I'll give you a free CRM assessment, and then you go in and you open up the configuration, and any configuration you can find things that you can pick on. Oh, they don't have tooltip text here. You should always have tooltip text here, and just find things to pick at to cause. By tearing down whoever their current partner is, you create, supposedly, I found these things, I'm better, you hire me, you pay me.
Hold on. That's not what we're talking about here. Pointing out things, trying to get business, it's okay, but you don't open your business proposal by stating, how's it possible that your CRM deployment is so horrible and it sucks? And how is it possible that you're not losing people who live in because they can't stand what previous partner has created?
Your haircut is very ugly. Let me cut your hair.
That's right. So, your head is very odd shape, very strange and unusual and ugly shape, I would say. Let me do your haircut.
Right.
Yeah, so interesting. So is telling people that they suck works? I know people are more tolerant in small businesses.
Right.
They not so much more tolerant, but they kind of cut to the chase much quicker. I had the example of this just yesterday when I was pitching something, and luckily I was stopped and say, look, just cut to the chase. You're just talking, we don't want to waste your time, our time. Just get to it. We trust you, so just get to it. So, and I was able to pitch the idea within like 5 minutes, what we want to do, instead of waffling around for half an hour. So, small businesses are, much more agile and less, what we call here, less bullshit tolerant. So
that's why you should listen to our productivity podcast, because on our effective meeting episode. On our effective meeting episode, we talked about you should pregame your spiel with an insider before your presentation, so you know how much schmoozing to do and how much to get to the point you should do.
Okay, so getting to the point is fine, as long as you don't tell people that dialogues are ugly. Because you never know what the reaction is going to be. If you come across Joel and you tell him dialogues are ugly, he's going to rip your head off.
Well, don't tell them dialogues are ugly until we have a viable replacement that's pretty.
Okay. That's enough. Okay, Joel, that's enough. Chill. Breathe in, breathe out. But one of the things about productivity or podcast, I like the name. Did you trademark it? What is it? Did you hear it before?
I came up with it and I searched in iTunes. But what I found is, and that's why when I tweeted out, I say podcast, but I say the productivity podcast, because what I found is not other podcast directories, but Apple specifically has built-in misspellings. So if you search for podcast, you don't get it. If you search for CRM audio productivity, you'll find it. If you search for Matthew C. Anderson, you search for me, you'll get it. But you search for podcast, you will just get the top podcast.
Okay, got it. But
exactly.
One of the things, I noticed that sometimes I see the episode I really would like to listen to, like Stop Procrastinating, but then I don't listen to it because I'm afraid that it's going to tell me how bad I am at things, Like it's just going to highlight. Effectively, it's going to tell me that I suck at things, right? And I'm
makes you feel worthless.
Can I procrastinate about listening to procrastination podcast? So
you can, and we talked about that there are some valid reasons to procrastinate, because if you can't survive if you make everything urgent, so you have to put some things off. It's just prioritizing what you're procrastinating at.
Oh, so now I feel better.
Be
So I prioritize this episode as number 472 between 473 episodes of other podcasts I need to listen to. So now I feel good. Yeah, you made it all sound better. Just don't mention dialogues.
This has been CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast, with Business Solutions MVPs George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Sean Tabor. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC. Follow us on Twitter at CRM Audio. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, or any place else that fine podcasts are available. You can email us at voice@crm.audio with questions or topic suggestions. Special thanks again to our sponsors, Kingsway Soft and Alexa CRM, and thanks to Dale Simmons for providing our music.